Welcome back to Peerless Martial God. Chapter 27. Self-confidence. There are certain people in the world who are perverts, some are degenerates, and there are others who are not serious about practicing the art of cultivation. The only thing they have in common is their filthy and perverted thoughts. Thought Lu Fei as she saw that Lin Feng was looking at her while laughing. I need to ask, how many lives do you have to act so foolishly? She asked with a hint of anger. Lu Fei, while talking, had quickly sprung from the hot spring. Her clothes were completely soaked with water again and became skin-tight, revealing all of her hidden curves. She was extremely attractive, she was as delicate as a swan. If it had been Lin Feng's previous world, then many people would be absolutely crazy about her and dedicate themselves to worshipping her. But this was not that world, this was not the old Lin Feng. His heart wasn't that of an ordinary person any longer. When looking at Lu Fei, he felt cold and detached, his heart was as unmoving as stone. I would have never thought she would confuse me for a pervert and take all of my actions as an attempt to take advantage of her. Thought Lin Feng, but he remained completely calm. If Lu Fei thought he was a pervert, he would teach her a lesson. An evil smile slowly crept onto his face as he was staring at her. Lu Fei saw that Lin Feng's face had perverted intentions and she could not suppress her anger. She was already getting ready to shoot an arrow through his heart and kill him. You really are looking for trouble, do not blame me for being heartless. The sound of her arrow cut through the air with a whistling noise. Her arrow was surrounded by a sparkling light and created a small explosion when colliding with Lin Feng's heavy waves. She has gotten much stronger since the last time we met, thought Lin Feng. He used his 9 heavy waves to retaliate against her arrow. The vibrations of the waves spread throughout the atmosphere around them and the arrow immediately crashed into the ground. Lin Feng's 9 heavy waves was much stronger than before and he had increased his skill with using it in battle by leaps and bounds. So it was easy for him to stop Lu Fei's arrow with his current strength. His 9 heavy waves had a strength far superior to 9,000 Jin. No wonder you dared to come back. But do you really think you are strong enough to attempt perverted things with me? Lu Fei released her arrow spirit. It automatically targeted Lin Feng. Lu Fei took an arrow out, put it in her bow and slowly pulled her bowstring with all of her strength. The sound of the bowstring vibrating under the pressure could be heard. Go. Her arrow was much faster and contained a great deal more power than her previous arrow. Lin Feng angrily groaned as this battle was already more difficult than he had hoped. He took a small step and used his 9 heavy waves on the incoming arrow. The power of the waves unleashed was terrifying. The arrow was blocked by the waves, but the arrow had pierced all the way through to his fist, leaving his hand feeling slightly numb. While the arrow had stopped, his fist still contained some power, which showed that his attacks contained slightly more power than the arrow. Huh? Lu Fei frowned. That pervert has made huge progress in such a small period of time. Lu Fei shot another arrow which was filled with all her killing intent. Do you think that only you can attack in a fight? Lin Feng said while smiling coldly. Lin Feng used his moonlight feather agility and approached Lu Fei at an incredible speed. The moment when the arrow was about to strike him, a flash of light appeared before the arrow, and as he sheathed his sword, the arrow split into 2. Lu Fei was staring in complete shock. Lin Feng had progressed much too fast. He cut her arrows in mid-air while still approaching her at incredible speed. His movement speed and ability to cut down her arrows was simply too fast. She had not seen him unsheath his sword and only saw the moment he had begun to sheath his sword again. Lu Fei seemed quickly stepped back and made sure to keep the distance between her and Lin Feng. She then took out 3 arrows at once. 3 arrows at once. The strength of the attack will exceed 9,500 Jin. Show me how you intend to block such an attack, said Lu Fei silently to herself. She took a deep breath and simultaneously shot the 3 arrows directly towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng immediately unsheathed his long sword and the sound of thunderous roars could be heard with each movement of his sword. The arrows could not even get close to Lin Feng before being completely repelled by the qi released from his sword. Roaring thunder combined with his knowledge of sword qi, Lin Feng's sword alone was stronger than the arrows, but when combined with the sword qi within the atmosphere, he wielded such a terrifying amount of power. The sword had blocked the 3 arrows with just the light of his sword qi. How's that even possible? Lu Fei's eyes stared at the scene in shock. With her current level of strength, she could only shoot 3 arrows at once. That was her absolute maximum power. If she used 5 arrows at once, then the power of her attack could only reach 9,000 Jin. This was an attack which sacrificed the power of each arrow to increase the number of arrows for use in a group fight. In a one-on-one battle, it could only display slightly less power than shooting the 3 arrows at once. But Lin Feng could break 3 arrows before they were able to get close. She looked at Lin Feng and suddenly a smile appeared on her face. She made sure to keep the distance between them the same as when the battle first started. Lu Fei suddenly shot 3 arrows towards Lin Feng again. The result was exactly the same as the first time she used this attack. Lin Feng broke the arrows in one hit using his sword qi, which was still glowing in the air around his sword. Before she even had time to attack again, Lin Feng's sword was approaching Lu Fei's throat and she had got lost in her own thoughts. She remembered when Lin Feng appeared in here for the first time, when he could hardly withstand a single arrow from her. The second time she had met him in the stormy gorge, it seemed like he had made more progress with his strength and had even wanted to kill her. This time was the third time, however this time it was her who could not even take a single attack from Lin Feng. How is this possible? How could he progress at such speed? Lu Fei felt satisfied with her own training speed and thought she was extremely talented compared to others around her. She constantly improved her skills in cultivation on a daily basis. The power of Lin Feng's attack was just too powerful, she could not even defend herself against it. Then suddenly his sword stopped right before piercing the delicate skin on her throat. Lin Feng had a smile on his face and he gave the impression he was looking at something worthless which could be used and thrown away. When Lu Fei saw his face, her whole body froze from head to toe with fear. What do you intend to do to me? Lu Fei stared at Lin Feng and bit her down on her soft lips. She could only endure her fate. Lin Feng glanced at Lu Fei who was soaking wet. Her body was tightly hugged by her wet robes and her curves were captivating. She could send any man into a frenzy of desire. Lin Feng let out a deep sigh filled with emotion. This girl was extraordinarily beautiful but she was too violent and her heart was merciless. Lin Feng looked longingly at the curves of Lu Fei's attractive body and let out a groan. You are listening to Peerless Martial God audio on light novel Aloud. Then with a smile of indifference as if he were toying with her, he said, don't think too highly of yourself. I'm not interested in someone like you at all. Get lost, I am going to train. Lin Feng stopped talking and started to sheathe his sword. Without even glancing back he headed towards one of the caves to train. He had wanted to kill her but the look on her face showed that she had truly believed with all of her heart that Lin Feng had always held perverted intentions. He could not justify killing her over the misunderstanding when they met. Next time however he would not be so generous. Lu Fei was stunned as she watched Lin Feng. She bit her pink lips so hard that her lips had started to bleed. Lu Fei was 16 years old and had reached the 9th Qi layer. She could use her bow very skillfully and combined with her arrow spirit, her attacks were extremely powerful. Within the Yun Hai sect, there were no ordinary disciples who dared fight with her. She had strong natural abilities and was extremely skillful with her techniques. Additionally, she had a very beautiful face. Everyone in the Yun Hai sect was aware of her, to the extent that of the people who were seeking her affection, elite disciples were amongst the lowest in ranking. Therefore, she had thought that Lin Feng was a pervert like many others that she had come across in the past because of her beauty. Why else would he strip down and then jump into the hot spring where she was training? She then realized that the whole time she had been giving herself airs. On that day, not only had Lin Feng humiliated her in a contest of strength but he had also hurt her ego and self-respect. Don't think too highly of yourself. Lin Feng's cold, disdainful and detached words had profoundly hurt her feelings. Next time, I will show him, thought Lu Fei. However, she didn't leave. She jumped into the hot spring again and started to practice her breathing techniques underwater. This was the best place to improve her shooting abilities and develop the power of her arrow spirit in the quickest possible time. Lin Feng went into a huge cave. In this cave which went deep into the mountain, there was a stone bed and a clean set of robes. Lu Fei had obviously been practicing here. That woman really had chosen a nice place to train. Lin Feng was satisfied with the cave. In the Yun Hai sect's history the new disciples would use the training grounds of the previous eras. These caves had been made by the ancestors of the sect. Their children and grandchildren had used these caves and they were still being used. They belonged to every member of the Yun Hai sect. The caves belonged to nobody, only with enough strength could you secure a training location. In some cases people would steal valuable items or materials from the cave. This showed how amazing these training areas were for disciples. Lin Feng sat on the stone bed and released his dark spirit. If someone came in, Lin Feng could immediately sense their presence and hide his spirit. Lin Feng entered into a state of meditation. The qi of the heaven and earth had begun to invade his body from the atmosphere around him. Lin Feng immediately started to practice intensely. A short time passed, the qi of heaven and earth became restless and begun to form a whirlpool. A radiant white light appeared and penetrated into Lin Feng's dantian. When Lin Feng opened his eyes, he had a remarkable light in his eyes and was grinning from ear to ear. I have broken through to the 9th Qi layer. Now there should be no one I have left to fear beneath the Ling Qi layer. When Lin Feng was at the 8th Qi layer, he could already fight against someone of the Ling Qi layer but in his battle he had been severely injured and if he had not escaped after the clash from their power, he would have most likely lost his life. Cultivators who had reached the Ling Qi layer had an incredible strength and many of them had already awakened their spirits which made them incredibly strong. Lu Liang, the cultivator he had fought on the other day, who was at the Ling Qi layer, had an eagle spirit. Even though his eagle spirit was extremely violent and powerful, it was still not a fully awakened spirit. Amongst the disciples who had reached the Ling Qi layer, he was still pitifully weak compared to others. Even though everybody had the opportunity to see their spirit awaken, not everyone was able to make it awaken. Some would have great difficulty attempting to awaken their spirit. Lin Feng was aware of that. I don't know how much time I have left, but I should have a breakthrough before the annual meeting. Lin Feng didn't continue his cultivation, instead he stood up and left the cave. He saw Lu Fei in the hot spring and she looked as angered by his presence there as she did when they first met. Lu Fei was staring at Lin Feng. She had the feeling that he had changed since their battle over the hot spring, but she was incapable of spotting exactly how he had changed. How many days was I cultivating? Lin Feng asked without taking notice of Lu Fei's facial expression. 20 days, replied Lu Fei coldly. That long? Lin Feng frowned. He would have never thought that he had been meditating for such a long time. Exactly what breakthrough did you have in those 20 days? Shouted Lu Fei, who couldn't bear not knowing any longer. I just broke through to the 9th Qi layer, replied Lin Feng. Immediately after, he vanished in a flash. Lin Feng suddenly rushed out from the mountains and begun heading to the annual meeting in a hurry. There wasn't much time until the annual meeting. It was about time to go back to Yangzhou City. Lu Fei was stupefied. She could not describe the feeling she was having at this exact moment, but she felt powerless. When Lin Feng was still at the 8th Qi layer, he could easily defeat her. Before she had thought that she was a talented genius. Then Lin Feng had entered her life and shattered her self-confidence completely. He did not want her beauty and had far surpassed her talent. What was left for her to have confidence in? End of chapter 27. Hope you guys enjoy the chapter. Please consider subscribing and hit that bell button for future updates.